Hello and welcome back to Game Brigade. I am Brian Greer, and on this show we do reviews, previews, playthroughs, and have conversations about our favorite board games. So if that sounds interesting to you, please consider clicking the subscribe button and joining the Game Brigade community. Today on the show, we're taking a look at The Witcher Old World. I apologize for not getting this up day one. Normally, I like to launch these Should You Back videos on Wednesday. That way, you guys are immediately aware of what to look at when you are looking at getting a new game. Unfortunately, we were doing a live stream the day that this launched, and so I wasn't able to film both things. If you are new to the show and you haven't seen my live streams, check them out. Make sure you go back and check the live videos. We do unboxings, we hang out, we're going to be doing some gameplay videos. I'm really trying to push forward this live streaming option as a aspect of my channel, so I'd love to have you guys come and hang out with us. Let's go ahead and dive into The Witcher Old World. Okay, The Witcher Old World. We currently have eclipsed $3 million at the time of this recording, with 15 days left to go, with over 24,994 backers. Quite well for these guys. My biggest concern, and what I want to talk about this video, is how good is the game and how well does it implement the IP and the world building from The Witcher into a board game space. We're going to talk about the expansions, we're going to talk about the stretch goals, we're going to talk about the value of this game in terms of should we be spending our money now versus retail. We'll dive into all that, but I also want to talk about, is this game going to be a good Witcher board game, or is it just a good game in general, or is it a bad game? Who knows? So first off, what is a Witcher? Well, a Witcher in the world of Witcher is a guy who has gone through some rigorous training and gone through different types of amalgamations using different types of potions and magic to alter his body to kind of be of more of a superhero-like abilities. Think more like Captain America or Black Panther than, say, Superman. Okay, so more physically fit, more apt for combat. And this is a very also like rigorous program, so not a lot of people survive the training program. So there's not a lot of Witchers. And through the process of this, the Witchers do go through a change of their body, and it kind of makes them stand out. So if you ever played the video games or if you watch the TV shows, Witchers do not really have a very good impression that they're carried through the world. People kind of think of them as weirdos or, second-class citizens, but they rely on them highly for their skills at being able to deal with different types of monsters. And so Witchers are mostly for-hire mercenaries, or, they basically take care of these creatures that are living along the lands, and they utilize their skills and their trainings that have been passed down through years of different types of schooling to master the skills to take care of these monsters. So you're going to see that implemented in this game, where you're going to be starting off with your deck. You're going to be traveling around the lands, training, leveling up, acquiring new abilities, and then eventually facing off against a monster that has been plaguing the lands. Okay, that's the idea. How well does it implement it? We'll see. So there's two versions of the game right now. We have the standard pledge at 70 euros, and we have the deluxe pledge at 125. Biggest difference between the two, if you're looking at one or the other, one has minis, one does not have minis. So when you're looking at this game, you have to understand that really the biggest difference and why you're looking at almost nearly double the price is the amount of different types of minis you're going to be getting in this pack. So as you come down here, you'll see we have 15 monsters, while the deluxe pledge will have 15 monster miniatures, and they have unlocked more. So you can see we have 8 more monsters in stretch goals, as well as 8 monster miniatures. They very clearly have labeled here, and this is a new graphic from when they first launched it, so I appreciate them doing this, where they talk about what's in deluxe versus what's in standard, and if anything is Kickstarter exclusive. When we're talking about the value of this game, if we should be backing it just in terms of is it worth our time now, or we're going to get past that FOMO? Generally, it's Kickstarter exclusives that are going to be pushing us forward on that. I would say that this game, as of right now, has very little Kickstarter exclusives. And if you did not get the day one early bird where you received a free miniature, I would say there's less incentive to be backing this right now, unless you are definitely wanting to get the Kickstarter exclusive items, and we could talk about that a little later. So within the components, we're gonna get a bunch of different types of cards and miniatures, as well as a Wild Hunt expansion. Wild Hunt was featured pretty heavily in Witcher 3. If you haven't played that game, I'm not going to spoil anything, but that was where the Wild Hunt was featured. And it's going to be changing the gameplay mechanics from a competitive game, which is the base game, to a more of a cooperative game, as the Witchers will be now working together to deal with the Wild Hunt. The Monster Trail is a really good addition to the game, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So we'll talk about that right now. So in the world of Witcher, there are a bunch of different types of monsters that you are going to be facing. You have manticores, you have slug hags, and a bunch of stuff, and they all have different names. Every monster has very unique ways of how you need to approach those monsters and how you have to defeat those monsters. From what I've gathered from my early viewing of the game, from watching other content creators, watching the producer on his own playthrough, the monsters didn't really have their own set of identities, which is an issue because The Witcher, every monster has that unique identity. And the whole point is as you're hunting the monster, you are looking for clues. You're trying to identify what type of monster it is, what is its motivations, and that's the core of what Witcher kind of is doing the hunt as you prepare for the fight. And so that's what the Monster Trail is going to be trying to do, is to fix the aspect of where the game was feeling a little bit samey in terms of the monsters, and adding a little bit more of variety in the fights, as well as adding more of the hunt aspects to the game, which I think is great. And I think it needs to be expanded upon a little bit just to really flesh it out. I also do think they talk about in the game how each Witcher has his own set of decks, but from what I've seen from other content creators, the decks didn't feel very different from one another, and it was only the ability down here which really truly felt unique. I do think it would be really great if each Witcher had a really different, not like, it's hard to balance it, obviously, but I really want to make sure each Witcher feels different and unique, because they come from different schools, different types of training, and then from there you can then upgrade and change it. But we want to make sure every deck, for the replayability aspect, has that unique touch to it. So when I was going through this, there was two questions I wanted to ask myself. The deck building, making each Witcher feel unique, is that going to be accomplished, and how are they addressing that issue? And then the monster fighting, each monster has to have a special way of wanting to fight it. What I would love to have seen in this game is, depending if you're fighting the poltergeist, or if you're fighting a manticore, you might have to build your deck differently. And what I would love to have seen, as you might not even know the monster you're fighting. And this is how I would imagine the game. If I was to build this game right now, I would love to not have an idea of what monster we're fighting. And this might be how it is. I obviously haven't played this game or seen the new changes to the way they're implementing these gameplay changes. But what I would love to have seen is, you put out some random tokens that might be identifying a certain monster. And as the players go on and they're trying to use the clues, the context clues, to find out who they're fighting, you might have to get some ideas. Oh, okay, we see some blood on some hay. Well, that might lead us to a manticore, because the manticores like to sleep on hay, for example. I don't know. So then you might have to build your deck in a manner to fight a manticore. Something like that. I thought that would be really cool, to really bring the lore into the world of the board game, so that you're going to have to use your skills. Now, of course, that's hard to translate, because if you're not a heavy Witcher player, you might not know what kind of cards to build. But even in the video games, if you just did a standard build that you like to do, you could still try your hardest to face tank a fight and not have the perfect solution to an encounter and still be successful. But I do think it'd be fun to have the ability to really hyper focus on a build based on the type of monster that you are hunting. So let's go back to the Kickstarter page. So here we are. You're going to see a bunch of the different types of monsters. Now these miniatures, of course, are in the deluxe only pledge. So if you're getting the standard version, you have a token here, a full art color token, which matches the art. Then you'll have the miniature. And here you can see the very variety of the monsters that you're going to be facing in the game. And all these monsters, again, have different types of ways that they are implemented in the world. And I think, again, that's one of the greatest parts about Witchers. When you get the bestiary, and I believe that's how you pronounce it. Don't quote me on it, though. And you're reading through it. One of the things in the video game is that you have to really learn about each type of monster so you can prepare yourself for the different types of fights. So this game is going to be using a card-based mechanic. It's a deck-building game. You're going to draw your cards and also use those cards to move around the board, where you will then upgrade. You'll see down here the different locations have these icons on them. So you'll be discarding cards to move to specific locations, which you will then upgrade your Witcher or do an encounter from that. Pretty simple mechanic. I like the way it works, and also making sure you utilize your cards to how much movement you want to do or prepare yourself for combat is interesting. And then we have the expansion, the Wild Hunt. Now this is, again, I talked about for Witcher 3 players mostly are going to know this. But this is what's bringing in the cooperative game. A lot of people were very, very hard on The Witcher because the board game, because they wanted a cooperative experience and less of a competitive experience, which I think is interesting because Witchers almost exclusively work alone. The whole point of the Witcher process of becoming a Witcher makes it so that you are more self-reliant. You're not needing the help of others to accomplish your goals. And because of the way they're ostracized in the community, it almost makes themselves kind of be loners. So I thought it was interesting that people were clamoring for a cooperative experience, but I think it's because people don't want to risk fighting each other and whatnot. So what the Wild Hunt is going to be doing is going to be changing the villain type you're going to be facing to a more powerful villain that will require the work of all the Witchers to work together to defeat the Wild Hunt. And again, I'm not going to cover this. I sure hope they don't spoil much about what the storyline for players who wanted to then dive into the video games are, but that is there. And then here is one of the Kickstarter exclusives. Now, this was the early bird, so if you backed in the first 24 hours, you receive this for free. If not, you can still spend €8 to pick this up. But this is going to be the mounted Erdrain miniature. This is the main character from the Wild Hunt. And basically, this is just a replacement for this miniature. So really, it doesn't necessarily change gameplay at all for you. It's just adding a different miniature to the board that has a little bit more of a striking pose. Don't get me wrong. I love that pose. I think it's super cool, and I want it. But is it going to make me have to back the Kickstarter if I miss the early bird? Maybe not. So take a note of that. And then we have the stretch goals. So the stretch goals are where we really dive into the campaign and we see, is this worth backing? Now, originally, I will tell you up front, the first 24 hours, it was hard to back this game because there was a lot of questions of the value that you are getting. Specifically because of the way this game works. And I mentioned this on my Monday episode. The game reminded me very much of Outer Rim, which was one of my favorite games, not like a top game, but very much an enjoyable game for me in the way the mechanics and the decks and the cards are utilized. In Outer Rim, and if you haven't seen my review, I recommend go checking it out. The players will be moving around the board, and then once you finish all your different types of shopping actions, which is as similar as leveling up in this game, you then will do an encounter, and you could draw a card. Now, what my biggest issue was with Outer Rim was the lack of variety in the cards. You quickly started going through them and experiencing the exact same mechanics. Or if you did a job, you're like, oh, I've done this job. I know what the outcomes of these jobs are. And it was a game that desperately needed a expansion to just add more cards. So when this game was released, I said, okay, I sure hope that they're going to have enough variety and content in the decks so that we're not getting the exact same types of scenarios over and over, or that a player won't be like, oh, I've done this one before. I've talked to the old man behind the church. I know what's going to happen. So that's what I was looking for. So this, with this first stretch goal, the adventure pack is going to be adding 168 different types of cards to the decks to kind of flush them out. I wouldn't even mind even more. I mean, I would love to see a thick deck that you can shuffle up, and you're not going to experience so much similar activities as you would otherwise. That's the only problem that I have with these games that are kind of scenario-based games that rely on printed materials, because obviously the chance of hitting the same stuff is higher. Kind of a side tangent, there's a game, Scythe, which has little cards that you'll read when you go to an adventure spot, and I always seem to feel like we're always reading the same ones. It's always the same exact stuff, and I just don't want to, even though I bought the expanded version, I feel like I still am hitting the exact same things. So that's kind of what this expansion is. I don't think, from what I'm hearing based on other content creators, that this is a big of an issue as I'm putting it out to be. But I just know from personal experience from other games that have similar mechanics, that is my biggest holdup on those games. And if I'm paying $125 for a game that is based on these kind of mechanics, I definitely want to make sure I'm getting the replayability out of it, because you can go buy other competitive games in the same world, not the same world, but the same type, for $50 at retail right now. So for half the price or over half the price, I can go get something very similar. So I really want to make sure that this game is bringing up, holding it up. So we're going to have a bunch of different types of expansions. Now, some of these things we're not going to really cover because they're just flushing out more of the expansions, like the Wild Hunt expansions. But what I do like is they are adding more of the monsters and adding more witchers and more components. This is stuff that I want to see right here. More special cards for the Monster Trail expansion. I think the Monster Trail should be their priority right now. Let's really give these monsters a unique identity. We have a good amount of monsters. Like, we had 15 and 8, I think was what the starting number was. I think what it was, right? We had 15 and now we have 8. That's a good amount of monsters. I think now the goal should be, okay, how can we make these monsters very unique so that the players might have different ways they want to complete them? And I just think that would be a really good aspect to the game. So one other thing that I really like to talk about with the stretch goals, comparatively to other IPs that we've seen this year alone, when games have been blowing up as well as these games have, we've seen them readjust their stretch goal levels to accommodate for the higher funding. These guys have not, which is very commendable. I thought they would. I honestly thought they would. When the game was first launched, they immediately hit $1 million, and the stretch goals were only to like 370,000, and they stopped. They stopped updating, and I was like, oh no, they're gonna pull the same thing Academy Games did, and they're gonna start doing these massive leaping jumps of stretch goals, and that means less content being released. But they didn't. They basically said they had to take a step and make sure that they had all the stretch goals lined up and come up with some new ideas, which is cool. So they've kept it the same relative system. You can see there's a little bit of a different jump from here to here, but for the most part, they have kept it very tight as they're growing. Now, as of right now, we're at 2.6 for the expansions, and we're obviously at 3 million as of right now. They're filming, so we expect more. Now, it is, according right now, it's nighttime for them, so they're probably sleeping, but we expect more and more expansions to come. And again, I want to see more Monster Trail. I think that's super important. So I think that's going to be wrapping up. Let's cut it back to me real quick. They do have shipping down here. They say VAT is included in the shipping. You're looking at 20 euros to 45 depending on your location. Check the chart, make sure you're available for that. And they do say we are not charging additional VAT in the Pledge Manager. Okay, let's bring it back. So, final recommendations. Do I recommend backing this game, or am I backing this game? Obviously, if you were keen to watch the screen, you will see that I am backing this game. I'm a big Witcher fan. I really like the IP. I like the world that they have built over the books and the games. My wife has played way more Witcher than I have, and she's reading the books or has read some of the books. And I've played the Witcher 3 video game, which is just a a commitment on its own. It's so much content, but the world that they've built is an incredible world, and I really want to see that implemented here in the board game so that I can experience The Witcher with my friends who probably haven't played the board game or the video game. That's kind of what I wanted. That's the whole point of board gaming to me, is to express or bring people into things that I really enjoy. And that's what I see here is an opportunity for us to have a game that's really cool in a world that I love. And I just want to make sure that they're hitting on those points that makes Witcher The Witcher. So in terms of Kickstarter exclusives, right now there's only 2 Kickstarter exclusives of the filming. You have the horse. Actually, I didn't even show you. It's a miniature of a horse on a house, which is a joke because CD Projekt Red has games that are usually very buggy, unfortunately. And so Roach, the horse of Geralt, sometimes will be just doing the weirdest things as you're playing. You'll be like, why is my horse on a house? Stuff like that. And then you have the Eldraine miniature, which is a Kickstarter exclusive for this, but you can buy it if you didn't make it in the early bird for €8. So I would say this game is definitely going to retail. It's too big of a game not to go to retail. It's just the question of, is it worth it for you to get it now versus later? And again, what kind of exclusives are they going to be releasing down the pipeline? Right now, we don't have a lot of exclusives, so I could see an argument to saying, I missed the early bird, or I don't necessarily want to pay for the extra miniature because it already comes with a version that I don't, I have. Like, if there was no Eldraine miniature, if it was just a circle token and you had to use the horse, I could see a bigger argument. But you get a miniature, and you're just getting a replacement miniature. So, again, I don't necessarily see that as a big incentive to back right now. I want to make sure you guys are being smart with your money and understanding that this can hold up your money for a year and a half. So if I were to back it, if you were on the fence at all, I don't necessarily think you need to back this game. I do think what I'm seeing here from my perspective is it looks like there's a lot here, though, that makes the game something that I do want in my collection, and I'll be happy to own. I just want to see a little bit more tweaking, a little bit more emphasizing on the hunts, and I think it'll be a great game. So hopefully you guys like this candid, honest review of The Witcher, and hopefully this helps you guys make financial smart decisions. That's pretty much all my goal is I want to make sure you guys are spending your money well and that we're buying games that are worthy of our hard-earned money. So if that is helpful for you and you enjoyed it, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you really want to show some love, please click the like button. It truly does help me. I would love to see this video. Honestly, I would love to see this video have over 100 likes. We're always so close to getting 100 likes, but we're never quite there. So if you guys can help me out, get this video to 100 likes, that would be a huge benefit to me, and that would really make me happy. Otherwise, guys, I'm going to see you all soon. Remember, I'm going to be having less videos coming out next week because we're going on vacation for our wedding anniversary. So I apologize. I'm not going to have as much content. So hopefully you guys are okay with that, and I will see you next time.